Bloomberg is now on your dashboard. With Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it gives you access to every Bloomberg podcast, live audio feeds from Bloomberg Radio, print stories from Bloomberg News in audio form, and the latest headlines at the click of a button with Bloomberg News Now. It's free with the latest version of the Bloomberg Business app. That's the Bloomberg Business app. Get it on your phone in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Just download the app, connect your phone to your car, and get started. And it's all presented by our sponsor, Interactive Brokers.
Welcome to the Bloomberg Markets podcast. I'm Paul Sweeney, alongside my co-host, Matt Miller.
Every business day, we bring you interviews from CEOs, market pros, and Bloomberg experts, along with essential market-moving news.
Find the Bloomberg Markets podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and at Bloomberg.com/podcast.
For New York, get the latest thinking on, what's been just a historic day in the House of Representatives. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us here. Can you help put in context what happened on the House floor today?
Yeah, so we got the 2/3 vote to remove George Santos. We've expelled him, and it was it was a solemn day. I mean, he deserved it. He deserved to be removed. I voted for the expulsion, but at the end of the day, it is a sad stain on the institution, and it was important that we had to remove him so his constituents can elect somebody new, somebody they can trust and have a relationship with. The reality is George Santos had lost the trust of his colleagues, his constituents. And the bottom line here is we asked the Ethics Committee at the beginning of this year to do a thorough investigation. And they had issued 38 different subpoenas, interviewed 40 individual witnesses. They reviewed 170,000 pages of documents. And they were able to produce the evidence to the members that warrants his expulsion. I mean, he used campaign money on everything from luxury items to Botox. He even created fictitious loans, and then he used campaign donors' money to reimburse himself for those fictitious loans. We even had a colleague, Max Miller, one of our colleagues here in Congress, who said that he even used his and his mother's credit card to make unapproved purchases or donations. And so it is really troubling and disturbing that we had this con artist sitting in Congress with us. And quite frankly, it's been a distraction this entire year. So I'm relieved to see that he will no longer be in this institution. And I'm hopeful that we will have a special election very soon. As you know, the governor does need to call a special election within 10 days. And the people of the 3rd Congressional District in New York, which is a piece of Queens and Nassau County, will be able to elect someone that they can trust.
Yeah, Congresswoman, maybe if you can just elaborate there. Tell us, what is a special election? How does that play out from here? What kind of timeline? Who would, elect that kind of a person? Just give us a little bit of the lay of the land, how we proceed from here.
So following the expulsion, there will be a formal notification to the governor of the state of New York. The governor then has 10 days to set a special election, and then it would most likely be in February. And at that point, the people of New York's 3rd District will be able to elect someone new. And that's how the process will play out. So that seat will be vacant for a couple of months.
So, Congresswoman, will this help or hinder the GOP in terms of keeping the House?
Well, I don't think that we could have based our decision on that. We have to do what is right. In this case, he needed to be removed. But what I do believe is that the Nassau County organization led by Chairman Joe Cairo is one of the best in the country, and they have flipped because, by the way, not just because they're the best in the country, but because the Democrats' policies in New York are just so ridiculous, right? They've created a crisis, whether it's public safety, migrant crisis. The Democrats' policies have done that. And because of that messaging that Republicans are right on policy, they've been able to flip not just these congressional seats, but they've been able to flip the county executive. You have Bruce Blakeman there who's doing a great job. You also have a Republican district attorney now, county legislature. They were able to flip all of that because not only are they a strong organization, but because the Democrats in New York have done such a bad job and are driving the city and the state into the ground. So with that said, I still believe that Republicans can hold onto that seat in a special election. But at the end of the day, it's up to the voters. The voters get to choose who they want. The bigger challenge for Republicans is that our governor is trying to redraw congressional maps again. She is trying to tilt the scale once again after we had an independent master last year draw our maps, and we won these 4 seats. So that corrupt activity that we're seeing from the Democrats trying to tilt the scale and redraw these maps to give themselves an advantage is more what jeopardizes the Republican majority in Washington.
Do you have a candidate that you would like to see run?
I do not have a candidate. That is for the county organizations to determine. Hopefully, they're going to be doing their due diligence now, and I know that they will. They'll be making sure that they have background checks and that they're going to.
Well, they don't have the greatest track record. Let's be honest.
Well, that's why I'm saying. That's exactly why I'm saying. We've gotten their word now that they will be doing that, and so we could prevent this in the future. But look, I think it is important for people to understand that whether it's a Republican or Democrat, we needed to move to redo this. The last 5 expulsions, by the way, were all Democrats in our history. This is the first time a Republican has been expelled from the House of Representatives in the history of the United States.
Equal opportunity, I guess.
So, Congresswoman, you did list a whole bit of evidence that the Ethics Committee had compiled in supporting the expulsion of George Santos, but a lot of what the House members who elected to not expel him, what they were hung up upon was that he wasn't actually convicted of anything yet, that is. But, I mean, do you think that this potentially could set a dangerous precedent here, that if people's, skeletons come out of the closet and, you maybe you just don't like how somebody's voted, that their seat could be in jeopardy?
Well, first of all, he will have his day in court as it relates to responding to those 23 criminal charges, and that will determine whether he goes to jail, okay? But as it relates to remaining in this institution, we referred it to the Ethics Committee, and they did their investigation, was able to produce the evidence that showed that he took from his campaign donations and used them for personal gain and enrichment, and that was just inappropriate and warrants his removal from the institution.
Congresswoman, as I understand it, the Republicans have a 4-seat majority in the House, so that will go to 3. Practically, what does that mean for getting legislation through from your perspective?
Look, whether it was 4 or 3, it was still difficult, right? I mean, it is not easy when you have such a slim majority. We're trying to, reconcile the differences and see where we can find that common ground to move things forward. Despite having the slim majority, we've been able to pass a good number of these appropriation bills to fund the government. The Senate has done 0, by the way, so they have a slim majority there, too. I think it's by a margin of 1. So it makes governing difficult, which really actually begs for more bipartisanship. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes the extremes try to upset the apple cart. We see more bipartisanship, more common ground and common sense policy moving forward. And so we have to work with what we have, and we continue to push for the things that we believe in, which is we want secure borders. We want to support our law enforcement. We want to address this crisis of energy independence. We need more energy production, not less, like the president says. And we need to make sure that we are addressing our fiscal issues. And that means we need to spend less money and be more responsible. And so that's what we're going to continue to push with that agenda. And we hope some Democrats do join us because those are the right things that the American people want to see. They want to see inflation reduced, energy affordable, borders being secured, the migrant crisis ending in New York City. It would be great if Senator Schumer passes our legislation that would do these things because we've passed them already out of the House.
All right. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Nicole Mallikotakis, Congresswoman, representative of the U.S. House of Representatives, representing New York.
You're listening to The Tape. Catch our live program, Bloomberg Markets, weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business app. Or listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts.
Get the lay of the land on the markets as well as Washington, D.C. News coming from both places. Bailey Lipschultz, he covers the markets for us for Bloomberg News. And Joe Mathieu, the host of all kinds of stuff on radio and TV. He's our political go-to guy down in Washington. We'll tie in with that George Santos news coming out of the House of Representatives. Bailey, let's start with you. We've had a little bit of a rally here in stocks in the last hour. What's pushing that.
Yeah, market's picking up. The 2-year yield hitting a low of 4.57%, lowest since mid-June. This coming as Powell speaks. The big thing, guys, that stands out, Powell a few weeks ago said policy is restrictive. Today he's saying it's well into restrictive territory. Investors that I've been talking to, reading between the lines, taking that a bit more dovish than he has been. So not completely going full dove, Molly, but does seem like he's indicating more that maybe we are going to see rates peter out and maybe not see the massive cuts.
I can't help sometimes but just have to roll my eyes at people's, like, the traders' interpretation of the Fed speak. It's Mad Libs. Well, we're literally hanging on the removal or addition of one word.
But I will say that Powell's been very clear and he's delivered. That's why I think it's interesting that the market's right now pricing in 5 cuts this year when Powell has continued to beat the drum that higher for longer is here and they're not considering cuts anytime soon.
So, Joe, we've had an hour here plus to kind of digest the news coming out of Washington, D.C. Representative Santos from New York expelled from the House of Representatives. Yeah. What are you kind of hearing from your sources down in D.C., in the last hour or so?
Well, I find it compelling that a majority of Republicans voted to keep him.
Yeah.
When we spoke earlier, I hadn't seen the breakdowns yet, but a majority of the Republican conference voted not to expel George Santos. So I'm not sure what that means for the narrative of this is the principled party that did what needed to be done.
I see what you're saying.
The entire leadership voted to keep him. And look, we got through this before a little bit. Lawmakers see a precedent being set here. He's not been convicted of anything. While the Ethics Committee did recommend this action and the chairman himself brought the resolution, he's not been convicted of anything technically, and that makes other lawmakers a little uncomfortable knowing they could maybe be in the same position someday.
I mean, we did kid before that perhaps George Santos' next big appearance could be Dancing with the Stars, but it sounds more likely that he probably... prison is probably the next stop.
Who knows? He's got to go through his trial here, but there are a lot of folks speculating on what corner of the entertainment world might be a home in the meantime for George Santos. Because look, he's not going to go quietly. He's already, by the way, on his way out, put up a resolution to expel Jamal Bowman. And he says he's going to take as many other lawmakers down with him as he can. So we'll be hearing from George Santos.
Joe, I mean, the Republicans in the House only had a 4-seat majority as it was, thin as it was. Now it's even thinner. Does that practically day to day going to impact their ability to drive their agenda?
It's not going to help. To hear Speaker Johnson say the whole number of the House is now 434. We just, by the way, got to 435 for the first time in quite a while last week. A Republican won a seat in Utah that brought us back to quorum. So now that this has happened, we're just kind of back to where we were a couple of weeks ago. The fact is, I mean, 4 seats is nothing, and this technically doesn't make much of a difference. It's barely a majority.
Just to come back to the Mad Libs discussion, a.k.a. interpreting Fed speak, Bailey, so, we had Vince Signorella on before, on our chief macro strategist here at Bloomberg, and he was saying to us that what traders were also really hanging on to was this word if in the Powell statement. So the full sentence, to take the full context here, is that Powell said, we are prepared to tighten policy further if it becomes appropriate to do so. Is that another word that your traders getting hung up on?
That is one, but I will say it's been well kind of expected that the Fed is done. And we've seen rates implying that. So I think, to your point and kind of Vince calling it out, that if word, not a big if, but they're done.
You got to keep the optionality.
Exactly, and that's the big thing, and that's what Powell's messaging from the start has been, is keeping all doors open and not really trying to cheer on the market, and just calling out right now, 2-year on pace for its largest drop since on a weekly basis since mid-March. So,
hey Joe, just remind us, Joe, kind of how the next steps are going to work here in terms of, I guess, calling for a special election and all that. It happens pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, this is going to be up to Kathy Hochul. There will be a special election. She's got, if I remember correctly here, it's 10 days after the ouster to announce the election, and then it'll have to be held within 70 to 80 days. So we'll go through this, but then we have to go through it all over again with the real election. And, Democrats are determined to flip this seat. They think they have the votes to do it. You're going to see a Swazi campaign that could do very well in that area. But Kathy Hochul will make the first move here, and I suspect we'll hear from her in the coming days.
All right, very good. Joe, Mathieu, thanks for joining us here. Host of Sound On. That is 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Check it out. He'll have the latest reporting on what's happening. An historic day in Washington, D.C. And Bailey Lipschultz, he covers all the markets for Bloomberg News, doing a little roundtable there on a very unique day here. Both in
George Santos and the Fed, hand in hand.
Go figure.
You're listening to The Tape. Catch our live program, Bloomberg Markets, weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the TuneIn app, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
George Hampton joins us. He's the president and CEO of Currax Pharmaceuticals. He joins us via Zoom. George, your company, your Currax Pharmaceuticals, you have, I guess, a prescription medicine for overweight and obese patients. What is that, and how is it playing in this market?
Sure. We have Contrave. Contrave has been on the market in the United States since 2015. It's very different from the other products that you just mentioned. It's not a GLP-1. It's the only oral non-DEA controlled medication approved by the FDA for obese and overweight patients. And so it's been a pretty exciting year, as you mentioned. We've got surges in our business across not just the United States, but across Europe and in all 48 markets that we're currently operating.
So something, George, that Paul and I were wondering just as you were coming on here is the obesity crisis in America getting any worse right now? Like, why this year has it been such a breakout year for weight loss drugs? And, this really seemed to be something that was so top of mind in the news a couple of years ago. Is it getting any worse? Is it stabilizing? Like, why now all this attention on weight loss drugs?
Well, I think a few things. One, it was getting a lot of attention a number of years ago, and then the pandemic took over as the top healthcare news story over the number one epidemic, which is obesity in the United States, right? And so now we've kind of been able to turn ourselves back to this particular situation. Obesity is not getting better. We are progressing as a society. We have over 43% of our adult population that's obese, projected to be almost 50% in the next decade. Our children coming behind us are even more obese than we are as adults, and so we have to intervene. And obesity is kind of a special situation. It's really the only chronic disease that's reached this level without any type of pharmaceutical device or service intervention that's paid for.
So, but hasn't Ozempic been in the marketplace for a while? And there's been other diabetes pharmaceutical solutions in the marketplace. Why are we now saying, hey, this can be for weight loss? Wasn't that known for a while?
Well, I think it was known for a while, sure. Ozempic, importantly, it doesn't have the indication for weight loss. Its sister product, which is the same product at a higher dose, is called Wegovy. You'll see commercials for that. Mounjaro from Lilly is another type 2 diabetes product that will also be under Zepbound, a new name that is that will be used for weight loss. But they're essentially identical products. These tools are great tools. The GLP-1s, Wegovy and Zepbound, they're going to be great tools that a lot of people will be able to lose a significant amount of weight on. And they, when you get big companies like Novo and Lilly in the marketplace, they tend to do the right thing, right? They tend to, bring a great product to market and put all the products and services behind it to help that disease journey.
So tell us more about what Currax offers in this space, the drug that you guys have for obesity, how somebody can take it, what they should be maybe reasonably expecting in terms of the weight loss goals, and what the drug can accomplish.
Sure. So the product's been growing, significantly over the last decade since it's been launched in the United States. We acquired the product in 2019. And we acquired it with a different lens of how to grow the product and how to make it available to patients. So the first thing we did, knowing that it was a cash-only market, right? So these are not covered by private insurance, and they're not covered by the government yet, although I think we're starting to make some good progress. We created a program called Cure Access, where any patient who's prescribed the product can actually access the product for $99 and have it shipped directly to their home. We put that in place as a bridge to help people start to fight this disease for themselves until such time that insurance and the government start covering these products as they typically would for all other chronic diseases. We'll do well over 500,000 prescriptions this year just in the United States, over 1 million worldwide, and as I mentioned, we're now in 48 countries approved.
It seems like that could be a huge opportunity for you if insurance would cover this kind of a drug. I mean, is that something that's likely to happen anytime soon?
I think so. The TROA Act, which is the Treat and Reduce Obesity Act, has never had more support inside of both chambers in Washington D.C. We've spent a lot of time up there educating the different groups on exactly what this disease is. The biggest barrier really is that for the longest time, Americans and Europeans and all first world countries view obesity as a lifestyle, and you just can't tell someone to put the fork down and go for a walk. It doesn't work. They truly have an underlying disease that's driving their obesity. And you can see this in families. You can see families who have obese members and other family members who come from the same eating habits and lifestyles are not obese. And so, we finally start to have enough medications to make a dent in what's driving this.
George, your company, Currax Pharmaceuticals, it says here in my Bloomberg terminal based in Morristown, New Jersey.
We were prior to the epidemic. In the epidemic, we moved to Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Question: why are if you guys are in this space, which people are going crazy for, why are you still a private company? Why aren't you public, or why hasn't somebody bigger acquired you?
Well, our first goal was to establish the product in a better marketplace, in a better position than it was in the previous hands, right? So the company that had it before us went bankrupt. Oops. And yeah, right. And so we established Currax really to go after two different disease states, obesity and smoking cessation. And so we're doing a great job, I think, with now the #1 oral branded product in the United States. And we have a great product that's phase 3 ready. We're negotiating with the FDA for smoking cessation. So we continue to achieve our goals. I think we're getting a fair amount of attention now. Now that the obesity epidemic's taken off, and we've yeah.
All right. Well, I would say, I like Nashville. It's a great town, but there's no Jersey Shore down there, dude. So I don't know.
You have to excuse us. We're Jersey people in this studio.
I lived in Philly for a long time. I spent a lot of time in Avalon.
There you go. There's my man. All right, George Hampton, thank so much for joining us. George is the president and CEO of Currax Pharmaceuticals, giving us some more information on some of these obesity drugs, the weight loss drugs, and kind of where we are in that pipeline. A lot of options out there, and it seems like it's going to become even more pronounced going forward as these companies continue to invest.
You're listening to The Tape. Catch our live program, Bloomberg Markets, weekdays at 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the TuneIn app, Bloomberg.com, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Let's talk AI. Why not? Because that was a big driver of this market performance this year. I couldn't tell you. I wouldn't know AI if I tripped over, but people tell me it's going to revolutionize the world, and we've got one of those folks here, Charlie Hernandez. He's the CEO of MyPocketLawyer. He joins us live here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. So let's start really 30,000 foot. Charlie, what is MyPocketLawyer.ai?
Well, let me start by saying the entire legal profession is about to fundamentally change. And that's not going to be without a little bit of heartburn, okay? The world doesn't like to change, but luckily Silicon Valley is in the business of changing worlds.
So I hear.
We've got something very exciting, which is the first time AI technology is in the position where it can give reliable, high quality, and most importantly, affordable legal advice online. And that's going to change the landscape fundamentally.
Tell us a little bit about your background, Charlie, and how you got into this.
Absolutely. So I started a fintech company about 4 years ago after doing a JD MBA out of Harvard. So my background's in business and law. But I think the important thing is that when we were at this fintech company, we realized that consumers who are underserved from a financial perspective also don't have access to legal resources. And this is a huge problem in the US right now, especially when you get to low-income communities. Almost 100% of civil legal issues go completely unaddressed. And so that's what this technology is designed to solve for, is that we really have a big problem of people not getting the legal help that they need in the US. And for the first time, we have an ability to use technology to get them that legal help.
How does it work?
So we have a beta product out right now, which takes a contract that you have, any sort of legal document. We will simplify it, we will summarize it, we will explain it for you. But that's really just the teaser. The real product we're launching a month from now, and that's what's going to fundamentally change everything, because that is a place where you can go, any legal question you have, you can go, you can get it answered in a reliable way. But the challenges are, there are a lot of people who are afraid of this technology, right? You can imagine how lawyers would react to this. Most lawyers are anywhere between concerned to panicked at the idea of AI.
Yep.
And so there are really three reasons why people have opposition to this type of technology. The first one is people are concerned that if you use AI to give legal advice online, it will cause consumer harm if it gives the wrong legal advice. Now, the answer to that, and it's a really easy one, is that there is real consumer harm happening right now, every day, by people who do not have access to legal help. The second piece of opposition is that people are concerned that this will create a two-tiered system where some people will have access to lawyers, wealthy people, and other people will only have access to technology. Now, that is wrong because there is already a two-tiered system. Wealthy people have access to lawyers, everybody else doesn't have access to anything. And now the third piece of opposition for why people are afraid of this technology is lawyers are afraid it will take their jobs. And I'm here to say that we've built this technology in a way that all it is going to do is get lawyers more work, more clients, access to people that never would have had access to lawyers before, and more revenue streams. So it's really a win for everybody.
How do you see that playing out? How does that scenario work?
So there are millions of people across the country right now who don't have access to lawyers at all. And these are some of the most entrepreneurial people in our workforce, right? These are immigrants, these are people starting businesses, and they can't afford lawyers. And so in the short term, these are people who can go to a lawyer, and for the first time, they will have access to legal help in a much more efficient way, because by the time we send people through our technology to an attorney, to our network of attorneys, it is packaged in a really efficient way that we have a memo, we have a brief put together, they know exactly what the case issue is, what the context is, we have a recommendation for the course of action. So if it used to take them 3 hours to bring on a new client, they can now do it in 30 minutes.
So give us an example of this, Charlie. Let's say maybe, or you're in a car accident or something and you're seeking, maybe you're like, oh, could I sue? Could I get damages? And so is this going to be like a smartphone app? Like, what do you do?
It is so easy. All you have to do is go to MyPocketLawyer.ai and you ask your question. It'll guide you through a series of prompts that'll say, okay, where did this accident happen? Was it in California? Was it in New York? Do you have a driver's insurance policy? If so, upload it. We'll take a look. We'll get a guess of what your damages might be, what your liability might be. And if this is something that we can solve with the technology alone, we will, and that's it, and it's easy. If it's something that we need to escalate to a lawyer, we will look for you in your local area. We will find a lawyer that is specifically focusing on this practice area, and we will put you in touch with that person, and we'll send all of that information, obviously with your consent, to that lawyer to put you in the position to get your help you need.
And you have attorneys that are like signed on to the network already, that this is, I guess, do they see this as good for their business?
So the funny thing is, most attorneys are really, really excited about this. There's a movement in the legal profession called the Access to Justice movement, which essentially recognizes the massive need for this type of help across the U.S. right now, and by the way, beyond the U.S. too. And so we've had tons of attorneys tell us not only that they are really excited about this, but that they want to invest. And this is everyday attorneys, small and medium-sized law firm attorneys, all the way up to massive law firm partners, and even some celebrity lawyers also.
Wow.
How are you funding this thing?
This is where it gets really exciting. So I mentioned earlier that Silicon Valley is in the business of changing worlds. This is an $800 billion industry, and Silicon Valley is just dying to disrupt this industry. There is no more antiquated industry out there than the legal profession right now. It is so inefficient. There are so many places where we can make changes, and Silicon Valley investors are... let me ask you a question. Do you remember the first time you took an Uber?
Sure.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You do?
Sure.
Tell me.
A marketing trip in L.A.
Okay, wow, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
And how much of a better experience was that for you than a
night
taxi?
and day.
That is the experience that we are promising people with MyPocketLawyer.
That's a big promise, dude.
It is. And it's all of the same challenges, right? You have this highly regulated industry. There is not a free market open, and you have this embedded industry group that has access to lobbyists. There's regulatory capture at play, and they don't want to give up the revenue stream of basically what was the taxi industry group back then. And that's what the legal profession is right now. That's the fight that we are waging, and I'm telling you, it is going to be a war.
What kind of competition? Who do you think your competition is out there? Is there any technological competition to you out there in terms of this?
We are the most technologically advanced from an AI perspective in the consumer legal tech space. Now, that said, our competition really isn't other legal tech competitors or even incumbents. What the competition is people not seeking out the help that they need. So people who don't recognize that they have a legal problem, people who don't think that they can afford a lawyer, people who are scared to go to a lawyer. So that can be, we have a lot of folks who are immigrants who need this type of help, and they're scared because they're undocumented. They don't want to go to a lawyer. It can be startups who think they can't afford a lawyer. It can be anybody who doesn't get the legal help that they need. That is the challenge, is that they don't realize yet that this type of access is out there.
How does this make money?
It's a really good question. So it is a two-process system. Basically, the first one is a subscription model. So if you think about how much it costs for somebody to go to a lawyer right now, the average hourly cost is about $350 an hour to use.
That sounds low. Maybe that's my New York mind.
That's because we're in New York. Exactly.
Okay, I'm jaded.
Yeah,
okay.
But I mean, you go in New York market and you're talking $1,000, $1,200 an hour, especially when you start to get into the areas of startup law, real estate law, people who are trying to close on homes. But when you go to even rural areas where people don't really have access to lawyers, it's still extremely expensive to get an attorney. And so we can charge a small amount, a subscription model that really is a phenomenal alternative to having to go directly to a lawyer. Now, that's the first piece. The second piece is lawyers spend a ton of money every year on trying to acquire new clients, and we can make this job so much easier for them. There are huge untapped pools of consumers out there that need access to legal help, and we can send all of those people to lawyers, and lawyers are willing to pay us big bucks to do that.
So where are you in terms of the rollout of this product and service?
So this is where it gets really exciting. A month from now, we've got the technology built already. We are going to roll it out in about a month, and it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. I'll tell you, we've already gotten lawsuit threats. We've gotten a cease and desist from a competitor. Wow. People are not going to be happy about this, and it is going to be a big, big fight. I mean, to use the Uber example again, you remember all of the challenges that they had when they came into these new cities, and the taxi industry groups, taxi and livery, the departments of transportation, they didn't want to let their golden goose go, and that is the fundamental sea change that has happened in the legal profession right now.
Are there particular areas of law you think that this is going to be more successful in than others?
Absolutely. So let me just give you an example. In landlord-tenant law, we have an eviction filing happening every 15 seconds here in the U.S. In those eviction cases, 90% of the landlords have access to counsel, only 10% of the tenants do. And you can imagine what happens there when you're an unrepresented tenant going up against a landlord who has an expensive lawyer. You're not going to prevail. So things like landlord-tenant law, things like family law, employment law, wage garnishment issues, startups who don't have access to this, small businesses who don't have access to this, debt, consumer debt, bankruptcy. Really, I mean, I hate to be so expansive, but that is really the scalability of this technology that we're talking about. It's phenomenally applicable, and it really is going to change the game.
Day one, how do you start build awareness of this out there for your target market?
So we are being as loud as we can be about the fact that there is a potential for a new world approach here, right? The world could look very differently when this technology is available. And so we are trying to basically communicate it to consumers. We're saying, hey, this could be very different. You don't have to take a taxi anymore. You can take an Uber. You don't have to go to an expensive lawyer right away anymore. You can go to MyPocketLawyer. That's the communication process that we're doing. That's why it's really important to talk to folks like you. And I think the interesting thing that's been happening is that for probably over a decade, lawyers have recognized the challenges that the access to justice crisis represents, that lawyers are embedded, they don't want to give up the revenue streams that they have, and they think they have to. We're telling them that you don't. We're telling them that we can actually make you more money by serving more clients. And the challenge always has been the legal community doesn't communicate with the business community, right? I was a JD MBA, so I was on both the law side and the business side. And there is very little communication. I go to these law conferences, I am the only person from the business side there, and I'm especially the only person from Silicon Valley there. Silicon Valley, they didn't used to invest in legal tech. That is something new for them, and it is very exciting.
Interesting. Fascinating story, Charlie. Thanks for coming in and sharing it with us. Charlie Hernandez, CEO of MyPocketLawyer.
Thanks for listening to the Bloomberg Markets podcast. You can subscribe and listen to interviews at Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast platform you prefer. I'm Matt Miller. I'm on Twitter at MattMiller1973.
And I'm Paul Sweeney. I'm on Twitter at PT Sweeney. Before the podcast, you can always catch us worldwide at Bloomberg Radio.